moment, a singular moment in every man's life when he realizes something that changes everything. The world isn't random, success isn't luck, and the men who seem to bend reality around them, they know something you don't. They've discovered what Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel, what Nietzsche named the will to power, what the Stoics understood as the discipline of desire, and what Carl Jung revealed as the process of individuation. Today, I'm going to share with you 7 philosophical principles that don't just change how you think. They literally rewire how you exist. These aren't life hacks. These aren't motivational quotes. This is ancient wisdom that transforms ordinary men into forces of nature. But here's what they won't tell you in philosophy class. This knowledge comes with a warning. Once you truly understand these principles, once they integrate into your being, there's no going back. You become someone the world notices, someone who moves differently, someone who speaks and the room listens. Are you ready for that level of transformation? Because what I'm about to share with you has been hidden in plain sight for over 2,000 years. Principle 1. The discipline of perception. Reality is negotiable, but only for those who understand the game. Let me tell you about 2 men who witnessed the same car accident. The first man saw chaos, injustice, random violence. He went home angry, afraid, convinced the world was falling apart. The second man saw impermanence, the fragility of life, and a reminder to cherish every moment. He went home grateful, purposeful, more alive than before. Same event, different universe. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But most people read this as positive thinking. It's not. It's something far more powerful. It's the recognition that reality itself is constructed by consciousness. The Stoics understood that between stimulus and response lies the space where heroes are born. In that space, that microscopic gap, you choose not just how to react, but literally which reality you're going to inhabit. Watch a master at work. When crisis hits, when chaos erupts, when everyone else is losing their minds, he doesn't just stay calm. He seems to exist in a completely different dimension where the problem isn't even real yet. That's not confidence. That's disciplined perception. Here's the practical application. For the next 30 days before you react to anything, ask yourself this question. What reality am I choosing to create right now? Not, how do I feel about this? Not, is this fair? But what reality am I about to construct? Because here's what the philosophers discovered. The man who controls his perception controls his world, and the man who controls his world becomes untouchable. Principle 2. The alchemy of suffering. Pain is mandatory, suffering is optional, transformation is a choice. Friedrich Nietzsche was dying, syphilis was eating his brain, his body was failing. His mind was fragmenting, and in that hell, he wrote some of the most powerful philosophy in human history. What does not kill me makes me stronger. But that's not the full quote. The full insight is, what does not kill me makes me stronger, but only if I choose to transform through it rather than be crushed by it. The difference between ordinary men and extraordinary ones isn't that extraordinary men don't suffer. It's that they've learned the ancient art of alchemical transformation, turning lead into gold, pain into power, wounds into wisdom. Buddhism calls this the first noble truth: life is suffering. But here's what they don't teach in meditation apps. Suffering isn't the enemy. Unconscious suffering is. When you suffer without awareness, you become a victim. When you suffer with consciousness, you become a warrior. Carl Jung discovered this in his patients. The people who healed weren't the ones who avoided their shadows. They were the ones who descended into them voluntarily. They made friends with their demons. They integrated their darkness, and in doing so, they became whole. Here's the secret the philosophers knew. Every breakdown contains the seeds of a breakthrough. Every crisis carries within it the exact wisdom you need for your next level of evolution. But you have to be willing to go through the fire consciously. The practical application is brutal in its simplicity. The next time life brings you pain, and it will, don't ask why me. Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Don't ask, how do I avoid this? Ask, how do I transform through this? Because suffering that leads to wisdom isn't suffering at all. It's initiation. Principle 3. The death of the false self. To be reborn, first you must be willing to die. There's a man you've been pretending to be your entire life. He's not evil, he's not bad. But he's not real. He's a construction, a mask, a character you created to survive your childhood, please your parents, fit into society, avoid rejection. The ancient Greeks called this the persona. Carl Jung called it the false self. The Buddhists call it ego. And every single philosophical tradition in history has recognized the same fundamental truth. Until you're willing to let this false self die, you cannot be born into who you really are. This is why most men feel empty despite having everything. They've built a successful life around someone they're not. They've achieved goals that belong to their conditioning, not their authentic desire. They've become masters of a game they never wanted to play. Socrates said, know thyself. But first, you have to unknow everything you think you are. I remember reading about a successful businessman who had everything: money, status, respect. But at 45, he felt completely hollow. One day, he looked in the mirror and realized he didn't recognize the person staring back at him. That's when he began what he called the great undoing. He systematically questioned every belief, every goal, every identity he'd constructed. Am I actually ambitious, or was I conditioned to be ambitious? Do I actually want this career, or am I afraid of disappointing people? Is this my dream or someone else's dream that I inherited? The process was terrifying. For months, he felt like he was dissolving, but then something extraordinary happened. Beneath all the false layers, he found something unshakable, something that couldn't be damaged by failure or inflated by success, something that was just him. The philosophers call this authentic being. It's not what you do. It's not what you achieve. It's not how others see you. It's the irreducible core that exists before all the stories, all the roles, all the masks. Here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. For 1 week, every morning, ask yourself, who would I be if I wasn't trying to be anyone? Then spend the day experimenting with that answer. Warning, this process will disturb people around you. When you stop playing your assigned role, others have to question their own roles. But that's not your problem anymore. Principle 4. The mastery of internal fire. The man who cannot control himself cannot control anything. Watch a master martial artist. His power doesn't come from his muscles, it comes from his centeredness. His speed doesn't come from franticness, it comes from stillness. His effectiveness doesn't come from effort, it comes from effortlessness. This is what the ancient Stoics understood about internal mastery. The man who is ruled by his emotions is a slave in a kingdom where he thinks he's the king. The man who masters his internal state becomes someone reality responds to differently. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, Emperor of Rome. He could have indulged every desire, satisfied every whim, destroyed every enemy. Instead, he wrote in his private journal, how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. This isn't suppression. This isn't denial. This is something the Eastern philosophers call non-attachment, the ability to feel fully without being controlled by your feelings, to want without being desperate, to care without being needy, to engage without being reactive. Modern psychology has discovered what the ancients knew. Emotional regulation isn't about controlling emotions. It's about creating space between yourself and your emotions. It's about becoming the observer of your internal, whether rather than being swept away by every storm. Here's what this looks like in practice. Imagine you're in a heated argument. The old you gets triggered, reactive, defensive. The new you notices, interesting, I'm feeling anger right now. I'm feeling the urge to prove I'm right. I'm feeling my heart rate increase. The emotion is still there, but you're no longer unconsciously controlled by it. This creates what the philosophers call responsibility, the ability to respond rather than react. And when you can respond instead of react, you become dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who can navigate any situation with precision instead of chaos. The practical exercise: for the next 2 weeks, when you feel a strong emotion, say out loud, I notice I'm feeling emotion. I notice I want a reaction. What would wisdom do here? This creates the space where mastery lives. Because the man who rules his internal kingdom becomes fit to rule anything. Principle 5. The philosophy of strategic authenticity. Be yourself, but be yourself on purpose. There's a dangerous myth floating around that authenticity means saying whatever you feel whenever you feel it. That being real means being unfiltered. That genuine people are just raw, unrefined versions of themselves. This is not authenticity. This is emotional incontinence. Real authenticity, the kind that creates legends, is what I call strategic authenticity. It's being deeply, genuinely yourself, but with intention, timing, and wisdom. Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman who ever lived, wrote, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain." He wasn't talking about swordsmanship. He was talking about life strategy. A strategically authentic man knows that truth without timing is often cruel. That honesty without wisdom can be destructive. That being genuine doesn't mean being careless with your power. Think about this. A master chef doesn't throw all the ingredients in the pot at once. He adds each element at precisely the right moment, in precisely the right amount, to create something extraordinary. Strategic authenticity is the same thing. It's the art of revealing yourself in ways that serve both your truth and your effectiveness. Here's how this shows up in real life. You're in a meeting with people you don't respect, discussing a project you don't believe in. The reactive authentic response is to express your disdain openly. The strategically authentic response is to ask questions that guide the conversation towards something you can genuinely support, or to extract yourself gracefully without burning bridges you might need later. This isn't manipulation. This isn't being fake. This is being authentic with intelligence. It's recognizing that your truth is too valuable to be wasted on people who can't handle it or situations where it won't create positive change. The ancient Chinese had a concept called wu wei, effortless action. It's the idea that the most powerful moves are the ones that work with natural forces rather than against them. Strategic authenticity is the same principle applied to human interaction. Your authentic self is a force of nature, but forces of nature can create or destroy. The choice is yours. Practice this. Before revealing something authentic about yourself, ask, will this truth serve the highest good of this situation? If the answer is yes, speak your truth powerfully. If the answer is no, save your truth for someone worthy of it. Because authenticity without wisdom is just emotional masturbation. But authenticity with strategy, that's how legends are born. Principle 6. The paradox of detached engagement. Care deeply about everything, be attached to nothing. Here's a riddle that stumped Western philosophy for centuries, but that Eastern wisdom solved millennia ago. How do you give everything you have to life, while remaining unshakable when life takes everything away? The answer is what I call detached engagement. The ability to be fully present, fully committed, fully alive while simultaneously being completely free from the outcomes of your actions. Picture a master chess player. He calculates every move with precision. He commits totally to his strategy. He cares deeply about winning, but if he loses, he's genuinely unaffected, not because he didn't care, but because he understands something profound. The game is not the player. This is the secret that makes certain men untouchable. They engage with life like it matters infinitely. They love like their hearts will break. They work like everything depends on their efforts. But they hold it all lightly because they know that their essential self, their true identity, can never be touched by external circumstances. The Bhagavad Gita calls this karma yoga, the path of action without attachment to results. The Stoics called it preferred indifference, pursuing good outcomes while being genuinely okay with any outcome. Buddhism calls it the middle way, full engagement without clinging. Here's what this looks like in practice. You start a business. You pour everything into it, your time, energy, creativity, passion. You work 16-hour days. You sacrifice comfort. You risk everything. But if it fails, you're not devastated. You're disappointed for about 24 hours, then you're already planning your next move. Because you understand that the value wasn't in the outcome. The value was in who you became through the process. This principle transforms every area of life. In relationships, you love completely but never desperately. In career, you strive for excellence but aren't crushed by setbacks. In health, you take care of your body but don't panic about aging. In wealth, you build resources but aren't defined by your net worth. The paradox is that the less attached you are to outcomes, the better your outcomes become. Why? Because desperation repels what we want most. Need pushes away what we're trying to attract. But calm confidence, passionate detachment, engaged indifference, these attract everything. Here's your practice. Choose one area of your life where you've been too attached to a specific outcome. For the next month, give that area everything you have while simultaneously practicing what I call outcome independence. Work like everything depends on you. Surrender like everything depends on the universe. Because the man who needs nothing can have everything. The man who grasps nothing can hold the world. Principle 7. The cultivation of philosophical immunity. Build a mind so strong that reality negotiates with you. There's a final principle that separates philosophical practitioners from philosophical dabblers. It's what I call philosophical immunity, the development of internal antibodies against the toxins of modern existence. Every day, your consciousness is under assault. Social media algorithms designed to hijack your attention. News cycles crafted to trigger your fear. Marketing messages engineered to make you feel inadequate. social pressures designed to make you conform, economic systems built to keep you anxious. Most people have no defense against these attacks. They absorb them unconsciously, like sponges soaking up poison. But philosophical immunity creates an internal firewall. It makes you antifragile, not just resistant to these toxins, but actually strengthened by exposure to them. Here's how you build it. You develop what the Stoics called prosach, continuous philosophical attention. You don't just read philosophy. You don't just think about philosophy. You live philosophy. Every experience becomes a teaching. Every challenge becomes a training ground. Every day becomes a laboratory for testing ancient wisdom against modern reality. Marcus Aurelius didn't write Meditations as a book for others. He wrote it as daily practice for himself. Every morning, he reminded himself of Stoic principles. Every evening, he examined how well he'd applied them. Philosophy wasn't something he studied. It was something he practiced like a martial art. The practically immune man walks through the chaos of modern life like he's wearing invisible armor. Bad news doesn't destabilize him because he's trained his mind to find the opportunity in every crisis. Rejection doesn't crush him because he's learned to derive his worth from internal sources. Success doesn't inflate him because he understands the impermanence of all external conditions. This is what Nietzsche meant by amor fati, love of fate. Not resignation to whatever happens, but active love for whatever happens, because you've trained yourself to extract wisdom and strength from every experience. Your final practice: create what I call a philosophical morning protocol. Every day, before checking your phone, before engaging with the world's noise, spend 10 minutes reminding yourself who you are and what you stand for. Read a passage from Marcus Aurelius. Contemplate a Zen koan. Practice Stoic visualization. Build your philosophical immune system daily. Because in a world gone mad, sanity becomes a superpower. In a culture of confusion, clarity becomes currency. In an age of anxiety, inner peace becomes invincible. So here we are. 7 principles that don't just change your thinking, they change your being. The discipline of perception makes you the architect of your reality. The alchemy of suffering transforms your pain into power. The death of the false self births your authentic nature. The mastery of internal fire gives you unshakable presence. Strategic authenticity makes you genuine and effective. Detached engagement lets you give everything while needing nothing. Philosophical immunity makes you antifragile in a fragile world. But here's what I want you to understand. Information without transformation is just entertainment. You can know all of this intellectually and remain exactly the same person you were 27 minutes ago. The question isn't whether these principles are true. The question is, are you ready to become the kind of person who lives them? Because once you do, once you really integrate this wisdom into your bones, you don't just become a better version of yourself. You become someone the old you couldn't even have imagined. You become someone reality bends around. Someone who moves through the world with such presence that your very existence becomes philosophy in action. The ancient philosophers didn't write these truths for scholars. They wrote them for warriors, for men who were willing to transform their suffering into strength, their confusion into clarity, their fear into freedom. The only question left is, are you ready to join their ranks? If this video has stirred something in you, if it's awakened something that was sleeping, then your real education is just beginning. Subscribe for more philosophical wisdom that cuts through the noise of modern life. And remember, philosophy isn't something you think about. It's something you become. The transformation starts now.